All right. Well, hello everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jackie, and my company is Jackie Sweet Shapes. And my cookie decorating classes is with Jackie Sweet Schoolhouse, my second business. I am so glad that you are here with me today or tonight or whenever you're taking this class. I am excited to decorate these hamburgers with you, these giant hamburgers. I'm pretty sure I have had a hamburger that was actually this large. So this is going to be a fun class. Grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine at whatever time of day it is for you. Feel free to go at your own pace. If you need to pause, you can do so because it's on YouTube. If you miss something, you can always backtrack. And then, of course, if you have done this a million times, you can fast forward through the beginning stuff because I am going to spend about 5 to 10 minutes just going over some basics about the icing consistency, how to hold the icing bag, set you up for success for the class. Okay, so this is a beginner class. And so if you're a beginner, you've never done cookies before like this is a perfect class for you. All of these are very, very beginner designs. They're not going to be too tricky. We don't have anything intermediate or advanced. So this is just going to be a fun class. And if it is your first time, it's a great starting point. And so I'm happy that you're here. We are going to be decorating 7 cookies. And they all look like a burger when put together. And so there are some that are a little bit more steps than others, but I'm going to walk you through step by step through each and every one. And hopefully you feel really confident to do this and that your end product is fabulous and you're happy and just have fun. That's like the number one thing with these classes. Sit back, relax, have fun. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, if you haven't already, you're going to want to take all of your icing bags that don't have a line on them and just kind of massage them a little bit like this. I'll show you here. So if you haven't done that yet, take a moment, pause, and just massage each for about 30 seconds to a minute just to get those colors all mixed in because we want them to look as great as they can. So if you haven't done that yet, pause the video, do that, and then come back and see me. Okay, so you have some that have a Sharpie line on them. I'm going to explain this to you real quick. All right. So we have all of our icings. You just want to take everything out of your box. You will need a pair of scissors and a little bit of water. I'm talking just a few drops of water. So if you want to get a little bowl, a little cup of water, that's great. I usually just take a water bottle and fill the bottle cap, and that's all that I need. You might need a few extra paper towels. So this would be a great time to go get those items if you don't have them yet. All right, we have a few of the icings have a Sharpie line on them. I think that's it, just those 3. Okay, so what this means is these 3 are thicker than the other that are of the same color. So you'll notice the ones that don't have a line, they're going to be a little bit more liquidy because they've been watered down a little bit to get that thinner consistency. The ones that have a line, they are thick, but they're also not as thick as I normally do them when I'm doing this. For custom orders, I made it a little bit thinner for you so that you're not getting a hand cramp and having a really hard time squeezing it out. They are a little bit on the thinner side, but they are still going to be thicker than these. So just, make sure you notice that, oh, I don't have a one for I got to get one of these. I just realized I don't have what I need for that. So just make sure that the one that has a line, those are the ones that are going to be thicker, and I will tell you as you go, so you don't have to keep remembering. I'll say pick up the one that has a line on it. These you use for outlining and detailing, and then the thinner ones you're going to use for what we call flooding. That just means you're putting that thin icing inside of the outline, which is acting like a barrier, and the thin icing goes in, looks really pretty, and it makes it look fluffy and pretty like a pillow on top of a cookie, as I like to say. So those are thick and thin. Then we have the green. I'm doing this a little bit different than what I actually had advertised. What I had advertised looks like this, but we're actually going to do something that looks a little bit more fun. And so this is going to be a very, very thick icing. This one may give you a hand cramp, but not to worry. We need it to be thick to really get the design that we're going for. And I'll get to it when we get to the lettuce. You'll see what it looks like. It's really fun and it's really awesome. The brown one is actually a medium consistency. So this one is somewhere in between the one with the Sharpie line and the thin. It's something that you can outline and flood with the same exact bag, and you don't have to have the two consistencies in the two bags. So this one is great for people who don't know really how to make the icing. If they're starting out, they'll just do one consistency. It's somewhere in the middle. It is a little bit runnier than the thick, but it's also a little thicker than the thin. So you're going to notice the difference with that. I'm going to teach you how to apply it, and it's a little bit different than the other ones, but not to worry. No, do not worry. I will set you up for success with that. Okay, so on that note, let's talk about how to hold the icing bag and how to practice our piping, all that good stuff, which is where we're going to need our worksheet. I'm also going to show you if you mess up and cutting a hole too big. I'm also going to show you how you can transfer your icing into a new bag to cut a new hole. Sometimes that happens, so I gave you 2 extra bags just in case that does happen to you. Okay, so first off, let's take our, trying to think, which one do I want to do first? Let's take our, let's see, yellow that has a line on it. And I need to actually get something real quick. Hold on. I need to get my whites because somehow I didn't have it in my thing. All right, so this is my thick white. Now I'm all set. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have our worksheet. I'm going to teach you how to hold the icing bag and how to pipe with it. Okay, so this is just how I hold the icing bag. I mean, feel free if you have another way. If you're not new to this and you've got something that you like to do, go for that. I'm going to show you how I do it and give you some tips as we go. And doing the worksheet is going to be really helpful for when we do it to the cookies, because this is the hardest part, is that outlining and the detailing. So I really want to help you out with that. So first thing we want to do is hold it under the knot. I like to push that icing all the way down because I want my hand to be completely above the entire icing. I don't want any icing to be above where my hand is going to go. So I go right under the knot. I'm going to go into my palm where my thumb is, right here. And then I'm going to actually squeeze my thumb into my palm. Okay. And then I like to tuck my thumb in and then fold the rest of my fingers over. So I'm going to show you from here. So you lay it into your hand. You're going to bring your thumb like you're pushing it into your palm. You're going to tuck your thumb in. So you're really squeezing mostly from that thumb into your palm. And then just fold the rest of your fingers over like so. Okay, so you're above the icing, thumb in, fold the fingers. You're going to have an upright stance with your wrist. So you're not going to be laying flat. You're going to have it here so that that tip is like directly above wherever you're working. Now, sometimes you get a little bit shaky. That's when we're going to take our pointer finger on our opposite hand that's not holding the bag, and you're going to put it right at the tip here to steady it, or you can even put it at like your wrist. Sometimes I find that I do put it on my wrist, especially in this class, because if I have it here, sometimes my finger gets in the way of you being able to watch what I'm doing. So that just kind of steadies you right there. Okay. Now, a very important thing is your hand that is holding the icing bag. Your elbow is going to be on the table, but your wrist is going to be up off of the table. So your elbow is down, but your wrist is up. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to give you enough movement to go back and forth. If you're down here, you don't really have like a whole lot of movement. So you want to be up because we're letting that icing just drag onto the paper, and I will show you what I mean by that. But if your wrist is up, it's a lot easier to do that and a lot easier to have more control with it. Okay, so we know how to hold it. If you already forgot, go back and rewatch it. But the most important thing when you're piping is being about, this much, like a centimeter to an inch off of the paper. The only time that we touch the paper with our icing tip is when we start and stop a line. So when you start a line, you touch to let it catch the paper, then you lift your wrist up, you drag, and then you come down, touching to stop the line. So the whole time that you're doing it, like probably 95% of the time, your tip of your icing bag is never touching the paper in this case or the cookie. You're always just letting it drag. That's going to give you those really thick lines for the barrier, because you do need to be thick enough so that when you go to put in the flooding, it's not going to like over flood out. You want to have that barrier so it kind of stops that thin icing from going off of the cookie. Okay, so now we're going to cut this icing bag. And I have been doing recently, I've been using this worksheet as a scale. So if you line up the very tip of your plastic bag to the second line, where you're going to cut is going to be about half of the width between the first and the second line. So you're going to cut like right there. And it might be a little bit bigger than about half of that width, but we can always cut a little bit more, but we don't want to cut too big because then we'll have to use that new bag and you only have 2 new bags. So try to cut a little bit first, and then if you need to, cut a little bit more. So use this as a scale, and then halfway between that first and the second. Sometimes I also like to say, and this helps people sometimes who might be a little bit more visual, is if you think of a number 2 pencil lead, your hole should be the width of a number 2 pencil lead. And so another way to say this as well is the little triangle that you cut off should look about like a number 2 pencil lead piece that popped off of a pencil. All right, so as you can see, it's pretty tiny. Okay, not too big, not too small. And what we're going to do is we're going to practice on the worksheet, and if you cut it the right amount, you should perfectly cover these lines. Now what I like to do, after I snip it off, it's kind of flat, so I just run my fingers on the sides here so that when I look at it, I can see a hole. And if I look at it, that hole should be, again, the width of a number 2 pencil lead. Okay. It might kind of spew out a little bit at first because there's some water that kind of builds up here. So sometimes I take my napkin and I'll just kind of push some out so I get a fresh, good, thick icing. All right, so being mindful of how we're going to hold this bag. All right, we touch to start, we drag, and then we touch to stop. So if you want to watch me, if you've never done this before, go for it. Touching, letting it catch, pull your wrist up, let it drag, and then touch down to stop. And again, that icing line should completely cover this black line. If you can see that black line underneath, and you can barely see your little yellow line, you're going to want to snip off a little bit more. And then also, let's say you cut a lot off, and your line looks something more like this. That's way too big. Okay, we don't want it that big. It's not going to make the cookies look very good. So if that is the case, and if it is not the case, go on with your merry self and just continue the worksheet. But if that is the case, I'm going to teach you how to transfer this bag into another bag so that you can get a clean cut and it's a smaller cut. So if you ever cut too much off during this class, this is how you can correct that. So if I cut too big, I'm going to take a big chunk out of it to make it easy to put into the new bag. And then I'm going to grab my new bag. What I'm going to do with my right hand, I'm going to take the bag that has the icing and I'm going to put it inside the new bag. I'm going to hold the tail, at the knot with that right hand. I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to squeeze this out, all out, so that what happens is I've just squeezed out that old bag all the way into the new bag, and then I tie a knot. And then I have a fresh bag and I can continue on cutting a smaller hole. You don't want to do the same mistake because you only have the 2 new bags. So now recut it. Use your worksheet as a scale if you need to. Run your hands along that seam. Look at it. Make sure that it looks like the width of a number 2 pencil. Lead, not the pencil, but the lead. And then we can continue on. Okay, so we want to make sure we're dragging. The only time we ever don't drag and we touch the paper is when we're starting and stopping those lines. Lots of hand-eye coordination. This part just requires a lot of practice. This part is the hardest, so don't be too hard on yourself if you're having a little bit of difficulty. It's totally fine. If you have time to spare and you want to do this, you can wipe it off and try it again. Like if you have time and you just want to do the worksheet again, you can also just wipe off that icing and you can do it again. I will note here that this is the only time that you can really fix your mistake. So let's say this is a cookie and I don't like that outline. I can just take it off with my toothpick and do it again. Same thing on the cookie. This is the best time to mess up. The circles are the hardest part. Lots of hand-eye coordination here and just kind of directing the icing and where you want it to go, and it's not always perfect. That's okay. We do have quite a few circle shapes today to work on. So it'd be good just to practice these these circles here, so that you get the hang of it, because it is kind of tricky. And I'm a perfectionist, so a lot of times I don't like the circles because they're harder to perfect. And when you're ending that circle, you just kind of have that starting line meet the ending one, and then sometimes I take my toothpick because there's like a little bump or something, and I try to like kind of push it down or kind of put it into the rest of the icing and just sort of smooth that out a little bit. I also wanted to say that it will take us probably at least an hour to do all of these. It might take us a little bit longer. And if you're, if I'm going too fast, if you need to pause, you can do so as well, but that will also, require a little bit more time. So just plan on at least being together for another hour, maybe a little bit more than that. And yes, it sometimes does take that long to decorate cookies, which is insane, but it's worth it in the end. So hopefully we're finishing up our worksheet here, and hopefully we also feel more confident in this part. So every single one that has the Sharpie line on it is the thick one. And so you're going to cut it this way every single time. And making sure, if you need to keep this, using this little thing as a scale, and then cutting halfway, between one line and the other. This is also a really good tool because if you You know, if you have that line right over the black line, you should completely be covering it, and that's the perfect width that you want, is to be able to cover that line completely. Okay, keep working if you need to, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So because we've already cut the hole in the yellow, we're just going to go ahead and do the cheese. So let's grab our square cookie. And in the advertised one, I did a little bit of a Swiss cheese here. That's just because I wanted to kind of have fun with the circles. I am going to do that here. However, I never eat Swiss cheese or whatever on my burger. I don't like Swiss cheese. So if you don't want to do the holes, you don't have to. You can just do the outline here. And just have some good old American or cheddar cheese, you know. But for the sake of learning a little bit more, we are going to add those little holes. And we will need our thick yellow, so just remember it's the one that has the Sharpie line in it, unless you had to switch bags, in which case it does not have a line. So if you need to somehow like differentiate, you can go grab a pen and mark a line on it, but just know that it does feel a little bit thicker, so that's how you can tell them apart. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is the outline here. Now, if you want, you can just focus on one line at a time, where you basically just do a line, breathe and take a break, and then, you know, get right up next to it, do the next line. Or you can try this method, which would be just doing it all at once. And the key to doing it all at once without stopping is every time you turn a corner, you're going to pause, you're going to squeeze a little bit more out, and then change direction. So you're going to kind of dip down, squeeze, pause as you turn the corner, and then change direction. So you do dip down a little bit, just like you would if you were stopping that line, but instead of stopping, you're going to kind of pause, keep squeezing a little bit more, and then change directions. And I do want to note that you don't want any holes in this barrier. So if you have any holes within where these lines would meet, take, a little bit of icing and kind of like, dot a little bit of icing there, whatever. You don't want to have any holes in that barrier, because the last thing we want is for that icing to just kind of like seep under and then feel like, oh man, I messed up, I got to do it again. So just make sure that this barrier is thick enough. There's no lines or gaps in it at all. All right, I think I might need to cut a little bit more off of mine because it seems just a little too thin. So, okay, for the holes, we're literally just going to outline some holes. Just kind of random, some bigger, some smaller, whatever you feel like doing. Again, if you don't want this type of cheese on your burger, you don't have to at all. So just kind of randomly throughout, some big, some small. This may be a little bit tricky if you've never done circles before, but once you feel pretty satisfied with how it looks, we're going to let it dry for a little bit here. So just chilling here. We want that thick icing to kind of harden a little bit, so that when we add that thin icing, it's that nice strong barrier. So while we're waiting, I will talk about the next step, and hopefully by the time I'm done talking, it'll be dry enough for our thin icing. Okay, so we have our thin yellow, which we have not cut a hole in yet. Now, this one, you are going to cut a little bit bigger of a hole. So if we use our worksheet for that scale, for the thick outline one, you do the distance, the halfway between the first and the second line, halfway of that width, right? Well, for the thinner icing, and this applies to all of the other ones we're going to use, you want to cut about the whole width from the first line to the second line. So you would cut a line, it's about double what the outline is, so about like right there. Sorry, you can barely see that, gotta push it up. So that tip is on the second line, and then you would cut about the distance between the first and the second line. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Cut it. And then, if you've never done this before, I would advise watching me first on just this one. The other ones you probably won't need to watch. But every time that I flood, I like to start on the outside. And for beginners, I do say, you know, try to leave a little bitty space between the icing you're dropping in and that outline, just so that it doesn't over flood. But once you have that, then you're going to flood it in here, and we actually don't want to leave any spaces in this. So we're just going to come squeezing it out, and we're going to fill the whole thing, and we don't want any gaps in the middle. Take your time going around those circles, and we want to be a fluffy pillow on top of this cookie, a good amount of icing that it doesn't look too thin. You can't see the cookie underneath, but once you've got it all in, we're going to take our toothpick, and as we kind of swirl it a little bit in a circle, we're going to drag and push it out to that outline. Now, the icing starts to harden in about 2 minutes, so you kind of have to work a little quickly here, otherwise it's going to start to harden like as we're actually using the toothpick. And if you find that it's taking a little bit longer, like it is for me, I'm going to go ahead and drop some more icing in there, just because I really don't want to miss that window and it starts to harden on me. There's also another trick where you can shake and tap, and that just helps speed up that process a little bit. So you take it, shake it, tap it, and that does kind of help sort of even that icing out a little bit. So typically, it doesn't even take me that long to do that, but I don't think I put enough in. So next time I'll leave a little bit of a less gap between the outline and that flooding, because we really only want to be there for about 30 seconds, and I think I was there for about a minute, and it did start to harden on me. But once you reach that kind of like 2-minute mark, you don't want to touch it, because if you poke it, it's just gonna kind of create a mountain. So you just want to leave it be. Of course, if you do need to kind of, keep shaking it a little bit more, you can do that. But ultimately, you just want to let this dry, because otherwise, you're just going to be creating these mountains, and we really want that smooth finish. So you just want to leave it alone, let it dry, and hopefully it looks fabulous and you feel a little bit more confident about the flooding. This cookie is actually done. So it's very rare that in a class we start and finish one without having like multiple steps. So this one is done, and that's it. So we can let this one dry, and we know that our first cookie is done. Hopefully you feel really confident about that. All right, let's move on. All right, so the next one we're going to do is going to be the egg. So I really want to do the egg and the burger kind of like sooner than later, because those ones are the only ones that have details that are going on top, or also the top of the bun, but we'll get to that. So as you can see here, the yolk is on top, so we need to do the white first, and then we'll do the yellow later once it's dried. So let's grab our thick white that has a line on it. Thick white. Okay, cut it, that little piece, the small one, not the big one. Run your fingers down the sides, and then look at it, make sure it's a whole, and then if you want, kind of test it on your napkin, make sure that it's not spewing out water. And then when you're ready, we're going to just do the outline. And it really doesn't matter where you start. You can do wherever you want. And we're going to take our time so we're pretty close to the edge without it falling off of the cookie. But pretty close to the edge. Again, being mindful of how you're holding the icing bag. Squeezing from the top down. All right. And then we'll let this dry a little bit. Here. My husband loves eggs on his burger. He actually also likes eggs on his pizza. That's very strange. I remember I tried it for the first time and I actually loved it. But at first I was like, egg on pizza and egg on burger? Ew. But I actually really like it. So now when I make burgers, I will sometimes fry an egg, put that on top. But yeah, I never did that before him. Never crossed my mind to put egg on pizza and burgers. Okay, I'm kind of giving it a little bit of time to dry here. I mean, it doesn't need like too long, but I don't want to just like jump right in, so I try to do at least like 30 seconds if I can help it. And then we'll add in the thin icing. Okay, this one we're not navigating through these little holes, so it is just going to be starting on the outside, spiraling inside, not leaving any gaps on the inside, and leaving a little bit of space, not as much as I did on the cheese, but a little bit of space between the outline and the rest of the icing. All right, we're going to cut the hole. Okay, and then, of course, you can feel free to watch me if you want, or just go ahead and do your thing. All right, really squeezing enough out. We're really getting a lot of icing on there because we don't want to be sitting with the toothpick forever. And we also want it to look very fluffy. And this is the only thing we need the thin white for. So don't be afraid that you're going to run out. You will not. Of course, you don't want to put in too much that then it overflows off of the cookie. So there's, the balance between how much so that you have enough but not too much. We also pop any air bubbles if we see them. And then if you feel like you're kind of going a little too slow, you can utilize that shake and tap. Just don't shake the icing right off. I have seen somebody do that. They shook it so hard that they took the icing off, and then another person did it so hard that the cookie broke. That's not what we want to do. So unlike the cheese, this one is not done yet. We do need to let it dry. We don't want to put the egg yolk on top of it because what's going to happen is it's just going to sink right into the white. So we do need to let this dry so that that top layer can be as dry as we can. Usually I'll wait, 4 to 12 hours. We don't have that kind of time, so we're just going to wait to the last possible minute to do the little egg yolk. So we just want it to be as dry as possible, which will probably be about another 45 minutes maybe. So all right, let's move that one over. Okay, let's do our top of our burger bun, because this one has the sesame seeds. So again, all of the ones that need multiple steps like this one we want to do first so we have plenty of time for it to dry. Okay, we grab a color we haven't done yet, which is the little beige kind of color. These do also dry darker than they go on. So when this one, after it dries, it'll be a little bit more of like a brownish color rather than sort of more like ivory right now. When it dries, it'll be a little bit darker. So Sharpie line ivory color or tan, and then cut that smaller hole. Okay, squeeze, but let's make sure we run the fingers through so that it's a nice hole. Mindful of how we hold it. Oops. And then again, the circles are a little tricky here. So if you mess up, remember you can wipe it off. Okay. But just trying our best to get this circle that looks just like the edge of the cookie. And I'm thinking, while we're here, why don't we just do the bottom of the bun as well? Since it's the same color and the same exact process, we'll just grab another little circle here and we'll do the same exact thing. So these will be identical. The only difference is that one will be set aside as completed, and then the other one will have to dry before we add the sesame seeds to it. I like burgers. Burgers are one of my favorite things. I like bacon on it. So good. And I was going to add bacon to this, but then it was a little too tricky for like the beginner class. It didn't fit the rest of the cookies, so I had to say no. I'll let that one slide, even though I love bacon on my burger so much. All right, so you should have enough icing to flood both of these. Again, you want to let it dry at least 30 seconds if you can, and then they're both going to be the same. Just spiral outside and then to the inside. Use your toothpick. Add some more in if you're sitting there for a while with your toothpick, because we really don't want that icing to start hardening, so we just try to get it in as fast as we can. Shake it if we need to help it settle a little bit, and then just try not to touch it. All right, bigger hole here. And I am going to practice on my napkin because it looks a little watery, but not too much, just to get that initial kind of part out. Okay, and then when you're ready, let's go ahead and flood this baby. Okay. So I will say, when I'm doing this, I actually don't leave the space between the icing and the outline. I rarely use a toothpick. I actually just like put it in, and then I almost use like the tip of my icing bag to sort of be like the toothpick if I need to. But for beginners, I always teach it this way because I was having a lot of people put in too much and then it was over flooding. So that's just kind of like, for a beginner, putting enough in and then just spreading the outer part to the outline so that you don't over flood it. But once you get really good at knowing how much needs to go in there, you can pretty much bypass the toothpick technique and just like put it in. You get real close to the outline, spiral in, and be done. So if you're feeling pretty good, you know, and want to try that out, I can show you that for the next one. And you'll see the difference here. Either way is totally fine, but a lot of times when I'm actually doing customs, I just go right to the edge here. So, and that's really the only difference, but you can see, you know, it saves a little bit of time because then you don't have to go with your toothpick as much, and we're probably going to use about the whole, almost the whole thing of icing. But then the other one, of course, dry, we'll give it some little sesame seeds on the top. I'm going to grab some water real quick here. We're almost halfway done. Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Oh, sorry guys. Okay, what do we have next? We have our burger part. So this one's going to be fun. This one, we're actually going to outline and flood, but then we're going to let it dry. And then when we come back after it's dried, and hopefully it's dry enough, we're going to take our paintbrush and we're going to basically like dab some extra brown icing on and sort of like literally like dab it on. And what that does is it's going to kind of create this sort of like bumpy look, which to me is kind of what a burger looks like. It's not really like a smooth surface, and so that's what I was going for with this. But that's not till later. So the first thing I want to do is outline and then flood. So remember that your brown is that medium consistency, but treat it like you would, you know, cut it the same way that you would for the outline. It's just going to be a lot more runny, so don't be like scared if it kind of like comes out really, really fast. You know, we'll work with it. So I'll show you. So we're going to do that little cut for that outline. And then I will definitely say you're going to want to test it out on a napkin. Just kind of take some out, make sure it's coming out all right. Okay, so kind of pretend that it is just like a thick icing. It's just going to be a little bit more runny here. But some people like it because it's a little bit easier, like to spread. It's just kind of a little, like, it's easier, but then the harder part is putting all of it in, kind of like that's a little bit hard because it's thicker, so it doesn't really like spread as easy. And so my biggest tip for this, is that you don't want to use your toothpick at all because the drying time is going to be so much quicker. It's not going to be 2 minutes, it's going to be like 30 seconds. So we want to get this in as quickly as possible, and then we are definitely going to need to shake and tap, but we don't want to use the toothpick at all. So don't be afraid to use, you know, quite a bit. And what we should do is cut a little bit bigger of a hole as if you were doing the flooding one. So make sure you got that bigger hole. And then we're not going to use our toothpick at all. So we have to kind of come right to the edge And then very quickly, well, as quickly as you can, don't freak out, get this all in here. And then once it's all in, and you do want to save just a tiny amount for that dabbing at the end, but then now I'll shake it a little bit, and hopefully we have all of that in there. Sometimes with this one it can tend to over flood a little bit. So if you notice that it's about to like fall off the edge, you can take your toothpick and sort of like scrape it off. And that's just because the outline is a little bit thinner, so it's not as like dry, I guess. But that's it for that one for now. And then we will come back to it in a little bit. And I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. Sometimes it's kind of hard for me to know what pace to go. So if I am going too fast, feel free to hit that pause button. All right, we're leaving this one over with the egg and the top of the bun to dry. And then I think I want to do the tomato next. The tomato is a little bit trickier than the others. And don't make fun of my cookie, it's got like a bump right in the middle. Sometimes that happens in baking. But we have our thick red and our thin red. So for this first part, you can probably see on this cookie, there is like, sort of like, looks like this part right here is like underneath. And then you have this part over here, which kind of looks like it's raised like up. So can you tell? This is kind of like inside, and then this is up. The way that you get that is we're going to use our toothpick to sort of like spread a little layer of red onto the cookie here. And then we're going to use our thick red to outline the whole thing and then to create these semicircles here. So we'll do those lines. And then you flood this whole narrow area. And then later, when it's dry, we'll add these little things and these white seeds. So hopefully that makes sense. So the first step, so step by step, what we're going to do is we're going to have our toothpick here. And then we're also going to get the thin icing that's red. So the one that does not have a Sharpie line. And we're going to cut that hole that we would for the flooding. And so what we're going to do is literally just no really perfect way to do this. We're going to kind of like pour some on, and then you're going to kind of try, and it's, you know, not going to be like the prettiest, but we're just going to kind of try to like spread that icing on. And we do want it to fill quite a bit of the space. So, because you're trying to get it to be like 2 semicircles there. So I might need to add some more. And then just sort of fill that space, but not too thick of a layer. But you also don't want to see the cookie underneath, and my little bump in the cookie is not helping with that, but that's okay. That's why I give this one to me, so you don't have to mess with it. Okay. And you do want them to be even. We are going to be creating those semicircles. You want them to be the same, or as same as possible. This part's a little unconventional. I usually use like a spatula to scrape it on, but all we got is a toothpick, so we'll take it. All right. So once you got something that kind of sort of looks like that, we'll let it dry for a little bit before we do the outlining. Okay, I think while we're letting it dry, I'm actually going to show you the lettuce. The new way that we're doing the lettuce. It's fun. Hopefully you think so as well. Okay, so this is all in the way that you cut the icing bag, and I will show you just how to do that. Alright, so you might need to even go back through this on YouTube if you need to see it again, but I'm going to teach you step by step how to orient the bag so you can cut it the right way. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to find the seam on the bag. So this is the seam, and you're going to have it so that you almost like fold. That seam is going to run on the top, and it's like you're letting that icing bag kind of like lay flat here. So that seam is right on the top, and then you're kind of like folding it as if almost like you would a piece of paper, and that's like the crease, and you fold it so that it's flat. Okay, so now, so you've got the crease here on the top, and you want to like push this icing back a little bit so that you have a flat line right at the tip. Flat space. You don't want it to be bumpy because that's going to throw off the symmetry here. And I know my camera just kind of went out of focus. So before, there we go. Make sure you guys see this. Okay, so now let's hold the bag so that the crease, the seam here, is to our right. And then what we're going to do is you're going to cut diagonally. All right, so again, if you need to go back over this, you totally can, but we're going to cut a line that is about a diagonal line from the right side to the left. And it's about 1 centimeter wide. We'll be able to, if we need to cut off more, we can. But about 1 centimeter of a cut, just like, boop, snip it off. Okay, now, it's all in the way that you hold it. So we cut that line, and we'll be able to tell if it's right or not based on this next part. So we're going to start squeezing, and I'm laying my wrist flat. So instead of being like upright like this, like I did with the other stuff, now I'm flat. And so what I can do is test this out, and if I basically move my hand like up and down as I move to the right, it gives us this really pretty kind of ruffly look. So practice a couple times, just getting used to how that feels, and making sure that your width looks something like mine here. You might need to cut it again if you need to. I may end up cutting off more anyway because I might want my lettuce to be a little bit like bigger, so I think I will cut a little bit more off, and then you can definitely do that as well. So let's try it again. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this part is a little bit interesting. I would say watch me first and then give it a go. Let me make sure though that it's in focus. Focus, camera. There we go. So we're literally going to like create those sort of like waves, and we'll see how this turns out. Create these waves. So we're going to start with the outside, and I like to turn the cookie so that my hand's always on the right. and I'm going to turn it as I go like this, and I'm going to spiral inside. Watch me first if you would like. We'll see how this goes. But we're using the outer part of the cookie to kind of like determine those waves, and hopefully it looks kind of roughly. It's not going to be super perfect, but hopefully it's fun. So let's go ahead and start squeezing. And you do kind of take your time. You don't squeeze like, you don't go so fast, because the more you squeeze, then the thicker it is and gets out like a little bit more. And hopefully we have enough. Probably going to use this whole thing here, my guess. Just fine. But now we've done the outer part. Now when you do the inner part, you're going to kind of like overlap if you have enough icing. Really squeeze that down. Wow, this is definitely more than I thought it would be. But we should be fine. And then we can also use our toothpick to sort of spread it. All right, so we're just kind of like looking something like that. And then I literally just used all of my icing. So then I can kind of like spread and fill any holes if I need to. But yep, just something kind of like that. Gives it a little bit of texture, dimension, but not too hard to achieve, it's just that. And if it is kind of sinking in, you can kind of create more dimension if you want. Swirl it. That part's up to you. That's what I did in the original design, was I kind of let it dry a little bit, and then I started used my toothpick to sort of like create more like ridges and lines and stuff. But something like that. And then once you do this one is done. If you do want to like wait for about 5 minutes, then the top part will start to harden, and then you can go back over it if you want to kind of give it some more lines and dimension. But just wait about 5 minutes, and then the top layer will be dry enough that you can kind of then go and it'll keep its shape. Now it's kind of sinking back into it, but in about 5 minutes, if I were to do a line, it would stay. So that is our lettuce. And that is complete, unless, of course, you want to come back. But all right. So let's come back to our tomato. So for this one, we are going to need our thick red, which we have not used yet. So Sharpie line, of course, just double check that. And then you're going to cut that little piece off. Run your fingers through it. First thing, easiest thing, I guess, is just the outline around the whole circle. It's not necessarily easy, but it will be a little easier than doing the semicircles that we're about to draw, because at least we are just following the edge of the cookie. What we're about to do next requires us to create our own lines, which sometimes is hard. It keeps going out of focus. Come on. Maybe it's got too much to look at. All right, so now we're going to do the semicircles. Now, obviously, when you do those, you do want to like have red all inside of it. So like if you see here, this part right here doesn't have red. So then when I do my line, I would just have to make sure I don't get that part because I don't want to see, you know, the cookie underneath. But we'll see how it turns out. All right, so 2 semicircles. We're going to create that line down. So we're outlining a line here. And I hope you can see that. It's kind of hard to see, but because it's red on red. But then you're going to come over and do the semicircle. And you'll want to try to mirror both sides. So whatever you did on that side, now try to basically do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I hope you can see that well enough. Creating that outline there. And then when we go to flood, we're not flooding the middle part, right? Because like these 2 semicircles, they already have that red underneath. So that's not the part that we're doing, but we are doing like the thin part all around here. Kind of almost like a peace sign. Almost, not quite. Missing, what, 2 lines. So whenever you're ready, I'm not trying to rush you, you'll take your thin red and then you'll flood all around. Take your time. And this is the only thing you need the red for. So if you need to use pretty much all of it, go for it. And I gotta quickly get this in before it starts to harden. That toothpick is really good to kind of get into these narrow spaces here. Helps with that a lot. All right. And there we have it. And just like the other ones, we're going to let it dry. Okay, which means we actually have all 7 of them outlined and flooded. 3 of which are already completely done. So there are only 4 that need these final touches to them to complete it. And so I'm thinking, since the egg was the first one that we did, we probably should do that one next. Since that one is probably the most dry at the moment. Again, if you want to do your little leaf, if you want to add some more lines to that, this would be a good time. I don't know that I necessarily want to. I'm just kind of showing you what you could do is kind of like create, but I'm happy with the way that mine looks, so I just will leave it like that. But you could drag it, you know, like through to kind of like make it, I don't know, a little bit more ruffly, I guess, if that's even a word. Probably not. Okay, so for our egg, this little guy is going to get the yolk on top. How do we do the yolk? Well, great question. So we're going to do the circle, outline a circle with the thick yellow. And then we're going to just flood it pretty much right away with the thin yellow. So that's what we need is our thick yellow and our thin yellow. So let's grab those. Okay, so a little circle, we're outlining it on top. Just be careful because this is dry on the top a little, as dry as it, can be, but it's not dry underneath whatsoever. The whole icing takes like at least 12 hours to dry. That thick, layer of icing takes about 12 hours to dry. Especially in the South, humidity plays a big factor, so sometimes it takes even longer to really dry. So I'm just saying that to say be careful not to poke it with your yellow icing bag. Just kind of very carefully put that little circle on top. So you'll want to take that thick yellow and just create a circle somewhere sort of in the middle and somewhat kind of perfect, but not really because it's impossible to make the perfect circle. But just kind of having that circle there. And then pretty much right away, because we don't necessarily have to wait, we'll put in the thin icing. And get enough on there, that it's not over flooding, but that it does look like a little pillow on top. Okay. And if it is about to overflood, you can kind of pick some off of it. That's what I just did. There you have it. A little yolk. It looks so cute. One of my sides keeps wanting to spill out. I guess this is like an over easy egg, and if it spilled out, it'd be like over medium. I like over hard. I might be kind of a weirdo, but I'm not a super big fan of egg yolk. So I don't know why. Maybe it's the texture or the color, but when I make eggs sunny side up, I'm like, I don't like the yolk, so I'll do them over hard, and then I'll do Kyle's over easy because he likes the yolk a lot. Matter of preference, right? All right, so that one will be set aside to dry. We are 4 down, 3 to go. We're almost finished. The next one I want to show you is the sesame seeds. So for the sesame seeds, they're going to be with the thick white. So that's going to be the one that has the Sharpie line on it. You probably already know that because we've been doing that a few times already. So what I like to show you here, and you can practice on your napkin or wherever you're working, and maybe, I don't know if you'll be able to see this super well, and I'll do it on the cookie. No, yeah, you can't see that. I'll do it on the cookie. So what you do is like a teardrop, and how you get a teardrop is you squeeze, you stay in one spot, you squeeze, and then you drag down. So you squeeze and then drag. Again, very, very careful to only put it right on the top and don't, stick this into the icing at all. But squeeze, stay in one spot, squeeze, and then quickly kind of drag down. That's going to give you that teardrop kind of look here. And if that's too hard, you can just do lines or little dots. That's fine. But it is going to take us a little bit of time, so take your time here. And And I do like them kind of being facing like all different directions, because that's kind of how sesame seeds are. There is no rhyme or reason to it. Squeeze and drag. Or polka dots or lines if you don't like this. But just little sesame seeds. It's going to take a little bit of time. You can also use your toothpick if you want to kind of drag it. Help get that little fine point. Not totally necessary, but just in case you want to. Okay. I think that's good for me. All right. I'll give y'all a moment to finish that. Once you get all those seeds on there, though, this cookie is done. And we're actually kind of nearing the end here. Just have a few more. Probably finish at just about an hour and a half. But I'm going to set this one aside because this is done and I do want to let it dry. Keep drying. And speaking of drying, I usually say this at the end, but I'll just say it now. So you'll want to let your cookies dry at least 8 hours. So if you're taking this class at night, just let them dry overnight. If you're taking it in the morning, cool, let them dry for the whole rest of the day. Or they can really stay out, like this for up to like 2 or 3 days. But after that time, after they are dry, if you don't eat them right away, you will want to put them in like a Ziploc bag or a Tupperware or something, just to kind of keep them a little bit somewhat airtight as best you can, because then they'll stay fresher longer. But they're good for about a day to 2 days without being, needed to be closed, because the icing kind of locks the moisture in, and so that helps to kind of keep them fresh. But yeah, unless you eat them all in a couple of days, you share them with your family, then no need for bagging at that point. But you can also leave them at room temperature in those sealed bags for up to 3 weeks if you want to wait that long to eat them. I kind of don't see that ever happening. I haven't known a single person that has done that, but some people give them as gifts, and just know that they'll stay good for up to 3 weeks. All right, we're gonna try this one, the burger, the actual meat. Now, I'm saying we're gonna try this because I don't think that the icing is really dry enough. However, we're gonna just see if it works, go with it, and see what happens. This is the time that you're going to need a little bit of water, and I mean literally just a little, and you may need an extra napkin if you already used yours. We might not even really need the water at all. We'll see. But this is going to be a lot of dabbing. We're going to have our brown, our napkin, our paintbrush, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do. You can kind of watch me here. So I like to put on in kind of a little area just a little bit of icing, and I will be the one to tell you if this is dry enough. I'm kind of scared. Okay, so it's not quite dry, so just be careful not to, like, don't go crazy with this. Be very gentle. But we're basically just going to dab very, very, very lightly. And if we do break that surface, don't even worry about it. It'll kind of add to sort of that bumpiness. But take it and then kind of spread. So the little part that you put in the area, you're just going to be dabbing it to kind of create this sort of bumpy texture. Yeah, it's working out all right. I find that if I kind of keep it sort of like horizontal, my chances of breaking the cookie is not as bad, or like that, the icing, I mean. So go ahead and have a try at this. Dab, dab. And if you are not able to be as delicate, another option would be just to wait until this completely dries and then do like the same thing again later after it's like already dry. But as you can see, I'm already starting to get, you know, kind of the look that I'm going for. So I'm happy with that. And the water is just in case your brush starts to kind of get a little bit too much icing on it. And you want to kind of give it a clean little wash to start over. So yeah, we're kind of getting there. Just takes a little bit of time, or a lot of time actually. So just keep on dabbing away. And again, it's totally fine if you do break that icing. It will kind of enhance sort of that bumpy look here. I've already pretty much broken through the whole top part. So and once it's dry more, if we really, really want to, we can go back over it when it's a little drier. But I'm happy with it. I'm getting sort of the results that I want. So I don't know about you, but I'm good with that. I may go back to where I started, dab a little bit more. So probably in about 5 minutes I'll come back over it. But for now, I'm happy with how that looks. Kind of bumpy. And then in about 5 minutes I would just, if I were you, just come back over with it. Dab some more on. But that's it for the burger. So kind of an interesting technique, and again, because, you know, obviously the class is only an hour and a half, it's harder to really show you how it would be, you know, in real time. Real time, I would let it dry for about 4 hours and then I would come back over and do this, but we don't have that kind of time, so yeah. All right, just have one more. And this isn't going to be very hard for the tomato. We've just got kind of some of these little they kind of look like fingers. And then these seeds, again, same concept as the sesame seeds. So I'll probably do the thick red first, thick red Sharpie line. And it's like right on the inside of this little semicircle. I did basically like outlined kind of these little sort of like fingers, and then just filled them in with the same bag. So kind of outline and then fill it in. So you have these little sort of flower looking things. And then the thick white, see, for the little seeds that kind of go around where the little fingers are. Same concept, stay here and squeeze and then kind of drag down. You will probably need to rotate your cookie to really get that. Because I like to keep my icing bag to the right of my cookie so that my wrist doesn't get on the cookie and mess it up. So that's why I rotate the cookie so that my hand can stay in the same place. And there you have it. Let me bring them all over. You can see our finished product. I may, if you want to, you can do a little bit more dabbing. I think it still might need a little bit more drying time. So maybe not quite yet. But I'm happy with the way it looks. Kind of does look like a sort of a burger. All right, so we got our top bun, let's see, cheese. Cheese goes on top of the burger, I think. Lettuce, tomato. I think the egg would go on, I don't know. I was kind of thinking it'd be like top bun. Do people usually put the burger on the bottom? Is that right? I don't know. I usually do this. Top bun, egg, cheese, burger, tomato, and lettuce, I think. I don't know, I'm weird. It's like I like the lettuce and the tomato to be on the bottom of the burger, and then like the sticky stuff like the cheese and the egg to be like on the top, but that's just me. It's probably too much information. Okay. So again, once these dry, more, then you can stack them, play with it, take pictures, whatever, eat it, do whatever you want. And that is it. So great beginner class. I hope that you had fun, and I hope that you enjoy it, learned a little bit if this is your very first time, or just had fun if it's not your first time. And just something fun to do during this time of quarantine still, or at least we are. But thank you again so much for taking the class. I truly appreciate each and every one of you for supporting my small business. I did want to let you know that I will not have a virtual class in August. I usually have one or twice. I have 2 in a month. I'm not going to do it in August. I'm just taking a break, and then I'm going to have a pumpkin spice one in September. I'm going to have Thanksgiving, Halloween, and Christmas. Not in that order, but Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then we'll have some maybe next year for some special occasions. So if you liked this, you want to keep learning more, come back and see me. I also love to see your creations. If you want to post on your social media and tag me, or send me a message on Instagram or Facebook, or even email, let me know what you think. And I hope that it was great and that they turned out looking somewhat like this. All right, have a good rest of your day or night, and I'll see y'all soon. Let me know if you have any questions, but for now, much love to you and yours. Bye. And out.